And now to our next conversation. Last week, Nigeria's Budget Office published the final draft of the 2023-2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper of the federal government. The three-year rolling plan is aimed at steering prudent allocation of resources in the annual budget over the next 3 years while delivering on strong economic growth and improved welfare of the citizenry. To dissect the major highlights of this report, this morning I have Damilare Ashimiyu, Associate at Afrinvest Research and Consulting, joining me from Ikoyi. Great to have you, Damilare.
Good morning, Ladi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, good morning. So we're seeing that plan there. It's a 5-year national development plan put together by the federal government's economic team. But do you see some kind of duplicity here looking at this economic program?
Indeed, we are not having duplicity. So how it works is that economic planning is usually a very long-term project, and most times broken down into smaller phases for effective execution and monitoring. And we've seen some countries that have economic plans of almost 100 years. The ongoing economic plan in China, which is called One Road, One Belt, is about a 36 years plan, which kickstarted in 2013. So bringing the whole narrative back home, the medium-term expenditure framework is perhaps one of the phases of the 10-year plan of this administration. We all recall that in 2019, when the president was, when he won his re-election bid, so one of his major economic agenda was to elevate or take out about 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. That led to the birth of an economic program themed National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy. That's like a 10-year policy project. And in between that, last year we also have the Nigerian Development Plan, which is like a more short-term phase of the 10-year plan. And now we're having the medium-term expenditure framework for the next 3 years. So if you look at the objective of these three economic plans that I've talked about, they are the same thing. So, but the idea is just that to have it more shorter in order to effectively execute and deliver on the objectives. And the key objectives of these three policies, from the MTEF, which is just a 3-year rolling plan, to the Nigerian Development Plan, which was released last year, as well as the National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy of the 10-year, is to, one, promote the diversification of this economy, reduce poverty, take Nigeria away from the bracket of being the poverty capital of the world, increase investment in education and health, and also drive stabilization of key macroeconomic variables. So indeed, we are not having duplicity of policies. It's just that the communication pattern has not been sufficient enough, to put up this clarity in the face of Nigeria. So basically, this MTEF will guide budgetary process over the next 3 years to achieve certain goals that will fit into achieving the Nigerian Development Plan and overall the 10-year plan on poverty reduction.
Quite interesting, and there are also some assumptions, looking at this plan. We saw that the average GDP growth rate was at 3.5%, exchange rate 436 naira to $1, average inflation rate at 16.9%, average oil price in production $66 per barrel, and 1.78 million barrels per day, all of that. But what is your take on these assumptions?
So to me, when I saw this assumption, I feel like the MTEF is just still painting a business as usual case for Nigeria. There's really nothing surprising. I'm actually expecting more, more in terms of economic planning targets for this country. But if you look at, starting with the GDP assumption, an average of 3% per annum for the next 3 years, that is not far from what we had last year at 3.4. And if you look at basic economic principles, at least from the notion of the Okun's law, for an economic growth to significantly impact on unemployment, that is, for your economic growth to reduce unemployment by 1%, an economy is expected to grow double-fold of of the population growth. So in Nigeria, we have an average population growth of 2.6% per annum. So if what we are expecting to achieve over the next 3 years is an average economic growth of 3.5%, basically what we are saying is that we are not reducing unemployment at all, because you need a double fold of your population growth to achieve a 1% reduction. So it means if Nigeria is having a 2.6% average population growth every year, want to reduce unemployment by 1%, we should be growing at least about 5%. And when you look at the potential of the Nigerian economy, based on several studies we have done, we have established that the Nigerian economy actually have the potential to grow at base case at about 7.5%. So if we are moving at that kind of a pace, it means that every year will subdue our unemployment level. That is, increase number of people that are actively engaged in productive activities. But at a 3.5% growth rate, it's just like a business as usual. It is not really going to have significant effect on alleviating poverty. And also looking at the inflation assumption over the 3 years, saying inflation will average about 16.9% over the next 3 years, means that prices are still going to remain elevated for Nigeria. So what that means is that by the end of the 3 years, the purchasing power of an average Nigeria would have eroded by more than 40%, because if inflation is to average 16% over the next 3 years, so that takes away about 40% of purchasing power. So I think more needs to be put in place in terms of our economic assumptions and how we intend to drive it, so that it can have lasting impact and it can achieve the kind of desired outcome the economy is looking at.
All right, let's look at the projected GDP numbers, for the period there. The share of oil contribution is estimated above about 5.0%, compared to the historical average of about 8%. Does this mean we're moving away from reliance on oil?
Yeah, so for me, if we give this part of the MTF assumption the needed effort it requires, I think this is one of the few bright spots of that rolling plan, because indeed it does not mean that the oil sector cannot contribute more to the economy in terms of absolute contribution. If you're able to ramp up our production to near 2 million barrels per day, which is our baseline, prior to when we started having high cases of bunkering and what have you. But what I think this tacitly is projecting is that the pace of growth in the non-oil sector of the economy, which is labor absorbing, will be so fast that its share will remain about 95% of the economy. And that will be very good, because that will help us in 2 ways. One, reducing the share of oil sector in the economy to like 5 or below, means that our vulnerability to external shocks, like what we experienced when COVID struck in 2020, when COVID struck in 2020 and oil price came down, will be very low. So our internal absorber will be strong, because the economy will be able to produce for itself and then run, independent of the dynamics in the oil market. But the downside of this is that we are not developing internal mechanism to enable us to drive faster growth in the non-oil sector, because with the recent happenings across the world and even Nigeria experience, we cannot but strive to develop our non-oil sector to make it independent, because that is where we can create jobs, that is where we can create prosperity, that is where we can alleviate poverty.
And also revenue generation, that's another problem that the federal government has been facing. But how do we make sure that what can the federal government do to make sure that revenue generation is not a problem going forward? I think a few things that are wrong with our revenue generation fundamental is the fact that number one is that we need to change our tax structure. And I want to say this with all carefulness. We practice more of a flat tax structure in Nigeria. We need to adopt a combination of it. We need to, combine progressive, regressive, and flat tax mechanism, just like we have in advanced economies. The rich, the very rich, the extremely rich are supposed to pay more tax
on luxuries and other items for the government to be able to generate revenue. It's quite interesting that in this nation, for instance, we have about 109 senators, about 360 House of Rep members, who on average, right, earn about 100 million annually. Now, if you do the math of that, that's rolling to about 60 billion. So if these few set of people alone are paying the kind of right tax that they should, that they should pay, estimate shows that the government should generate at least about 11 billion from this just, about 500 individuals. Now, talk less of the several high net worth individuals that we have in the economy. Why, what the government is supposed to now do for the low-end segment of the economy is to adopt a retrogressive tax, a kind of tax that takes lower from the poor citizens, so that you won't overburden them and stifle them. Some of the tax policies and ideologies that the government have come up with, like the one on telecom, those are going to be imposing flat pressure on every citizen of the economy, which is not supposed to be. We need to work on that. Another thing is that the government needs to enforce the cost-to-income ban policy on government-owned enterprises. Yes, in the last 2 years, we've seen government-owned enterprises delivering revenue that is better than what we used to do before. But looking at their capacity, these agencies can still do better. And another enterprise that we also need to close for our revenue to be sufficient or to even easily grow is we need to close our subsidy enterprise. This year alone, we have 4 trillion going to subsidy. If you put that in dollars, that's almost $10 billion using the official rate. That amount alone is enough to offset about 40% of our external debt, because about 40% of our external debt. But we're going to be throwing that into subsidy. Next year, we plan to throw about 6.7 trillion, which is about 15 billion. That is huge. That is a major drain. So if all these drains are checked, government agency becomes efficient, and our tax structure is rightly fixed, like what we have in advanced economy, where the rich pay more, the poor pay less, and you balance everything. I think the government revenue will grow, and we'll have more to drive economic plans and alleviate poverty across the country.
Right, plugging all those holes is another angle there that the government needs to actually take seriously. Thank you so much, Damilare Shimi, Associate AfriInvest Research and Consulting. It was great having you on the program.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.